How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Tesvav, Daf 15 of Masechta Makos. Friends, today's an interesting Daf, in my opinion. We are going to talk about Lav Shekidmo essay, Lav Shenitakle essay. Very interesting stuff. Okay, we're going to start on Daf Yudalad Amud Beis. 2 lines from the bottom. Amar Abba Bachano Amar B'Yechanan Kolo Saise Shekidmo Essay Lokin Olav. Okay, that is it for Yudalad Amud Beis, and we are now up to Tesvav Amud Aleph. Now, says Rabba Bachano Amar B'Yechanan Kolo Saise Shekidmo Essay Lokin Olav, that whenever you have a mitzvah Saise that is preceded, that is preceded, right, Dennis? I think it's preceded. I think proceed is like money, like proceeds. Precede is like before. Right, Dennis? Anyways, we've seen the concept of lav shenitko le'esei, right? Like, you have v'losasim mimenu ad boker, v'nosim mimenu ad boker ba'ish tisrof, right? Classic lav shenitak le'esei. That you have a mitzvah lo'isai, followed by a mitzvah essay that you can do to remedy the fact that you did a mitzvah lo saseh. In general, if you violate a mitzvah lo saseh, you chayiv makos. Lav shenitak le'esei means that the Torah proscribes. You see, this I think is not prescribe, but to proscribe. Is prescribe a word? To prescribe, proscribe, prescribe. Maybe prescribe is in advance, but proscribe. So here, like the Torah proscribes what to do if you violate that lav. So instead of getting makos, do this, and you can avoid makos. Now, I had explained the other week, based on Daf Heyamud Beis, Daled Amud Beis, I had explained based on a note that I saw in the art scroll that I think the implication of that note was that a lav shenitak le'esei doesn't have makos, because it has this other thing that you do instead of makos. But from the Gemara today, and I think maybe tomorrow too, I think the implication is that if, in order to avoid makos, do this mitzvah asay. If you don't do the mitzvah asay, we're going to see today, machlokas, are you mevatel the mitzvah asay? Is it just that you didn't mekayim it? Whatever it is, then you do get makos. This is, if you want to avoid makos, do this thing. Anyways, this is not what we're talking about. We're not talking about a lav shenitak le'esei. But it's important to understand lav shenitak le'esei to understand what a lav shekidmo esei is not. So a lav shenitak le'esei is that you have a mitzvah, is that you have a lav that the Torah proscribes a mitzvah asay that you can do in the event that you violated the lav to avoid makos. I think somebody's making noise. 1 second. Okay, where was I again? I don't remember where I was, but anyways, so we're talking about lav shenitak le'esei. Okay, basically, if you violate the lav, the Torah proscribes a remedy that you can do to avoid makos. Do that instead. Now, that is when the essay follows the lo taseh. Lo sosir mimenu ad boker. Don't leave over the Korban Pesach until the morning. If you do, burn it. Lav followed by an essay, which is the remedy for having violated the lav. However, if you have the opposite, if you have a lav that was preceded by a mitzvah essay, so if you have a mitzvah essay, for example, Savas b'nei Yisrael v'shalchu min ha'machne kol tzura v'chozav v'chol tamar le'nefesh mizocha nekevet t'shalechum m'chus ha'machne t'shalchum. Right, it talks about when you have a zav or a tzarua, some tzaras, send them out of the camp. That's mitzvah asay. And I don't want them going into the Mishkan or the Beis Hamikdash and being mitame the Beis Hamikdash. And if they do, they're going to be chayiv kares. So here there's a lav. Don't go into the Beis Hamikdash when you're tummy. Now, right before the lav, it said, if you're tummy, you have to leave the camp. So now, okay, let's say a person went into the Beis Hamikdash when they were tameh, so now the chayiv kares, can they just leave the camp and be like, okay, well, the chayiv kares and kil, if you warn them for makas, they get makas, as we learned in the Mishnah, right? Tamei shenichnas lamikdash, right? Or tamei abal lamikdash, whatever it's called. Or bal lamikdash tamei, whatever we called it yesterday. Anyways, so the Mishnah says you get makas for that if you're warned for makas. But can you just say, well, I'll just leave the camp, right? The Mishnah, right. The pasuk says that if I'm tamei, I just leave. It says that right before, don't go into the Beis Hamikdash when tamei. So maybe you say, wait, don't give me makas, I'm just going to leave. Just leave me alone, I'm just going to leave. And then we should be cool, right? So says Rabbi Yochanan, no. That's a lav shekidmo essay. That is a lav where the mitzvah essay precedes the lav, is before the lav. In that case, the essay is not a remedy for having violated the lav. You're still going to be chayiv makis, okay? So a lav shenitak la'aseh is when the essay follows the lo taseh as a remedy for having violated the lo taseh. Do this as a remedy. But lav shekidmu essay means that the essay was prior to the lav, in which case it is not a solution for having violated the lav. You'll be chayiv makis. Okay. Lav shekidmo asay versus lav hanitak la'asay. Okay. Now, back in the Gemara, let's read that again. Amar Rabbi Babachan Rabbi Yochanan kol lo saisa shekidmo asay leikin olav. That when you have a mitzvah lo saisa that is preceded by a mitzvah, lo saisa preceded by a mitzvah essay, lokin olav makis. Amar lo Amar. They said to Rabbi Yochanan, is this true? Do you really hold this way? Amru lo. He said, no, I don't hold this way. He retracted. He took it back. Amrabba, Elohim, Amra, Uchsiv Vitanino. To which Rabbi Babachana says, wait, 1 second, Rabbi Yochanan. What do you mean you retracted? First of all, you said, Lav Shekidmo Esei Chayav, Yechayav Makis, Uchsiva, and we have a pasuk to prove it, the pasuk that I just read to you a minute ago, Vitanina, and we also have it in our Mishnah, Ksiva, as I already explained. Ksiva, Vishalchu, Min Amachane, Vigomer, V'leitamus Machneim. It says in the pasuk, first you have the mitzvah essay, that you have a Zav, a Tsarua, a Metzora, you have to send them out of the camp, and then followed by Vilo Yitamu Es Machneim, and they won't be Metame. Right, they shouldn't go into the camps. They shouldn't go into the Beis Hamikdash and be when they're tamei. And Tanina Abal Hamikdash tamei. And our Mishnah listed as one of the people who gets makis, somebody who goes into the Beis Hamikdash when they're tamei. So we see that this lav, which was preceded by an essay, you nonetheless get makis for it. We don't say, oh, you went into the Beis Hamikdash, okay, just leave, and it's all good. We don't say that. You chayiv makis. So Rabbi says to Rabbi Yochanan, I don't understand. Why are you saying that you were choser? Like, this makes no sense. Of course, lav shekidmu essay is chayiv. So, ella my time of kohaderbe. So then, why did Rabbi Yochanan retract? Rabbi Barbachana has a good point. We have a pasuk, we have a Mishnah. Why did Rabbi Yochanan retract? Mishum de kashale onis. Because Rabbi Yochanan was troubled, was perplexed by the conundrum of ones, because ones is a lav shekidmu essay, and there's no makis. What does that mean? I'll explain it outside first. Ones, of course, is ones, right? A person is me'anis, a besula. So then the punishment has to pay her father 50 silver coins. Below siya leisha, and he must marry her. That's mitzvah's essay. Followed by lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yamav. He can't divorce her ever. Right? He was ma'anis her, and now he has to take care of her. He's responsible for her the rest of his life. He cannot divorce her. Again, v'lo siya leisha lo suchal l'shalcha kol yamav. Mitzvah's essay, he must now marry her, followed by a los essay of he can't divorce her. So now if you say this is a lav shekidmo essay. So if what Rabbi Yochanan is saying is correct, which is Lav Shekidmu Esei Lokin Alav, then I would imagine that in the situation of Ones, if after marrying her he divorces her, which he's not allowed to do, he should be Chayiv Makis. And yet we're about to see a Brisa that says that if he divorces her, he just needs to remarry her. So we're about to see if he's a Kohen, so then he gets Makis because a Kohen can't marry a divorcee. So if he divorces her, he can't remarry her. But if he's a Yisrael, so let them just get remarried, and then problem solved. So Kilu it says Velosiya leisha lo sucha l'shalcha kol. So he can't divorce her, but if he does, Velosiya leisha, just remarry her. So we see that Lav Shekidmo Esei Ein Lokin Alav. Okay, so my time kohadu be mishum dekashele Ones, because Rabbi Yochanan was struggling with the case of Ones. The Tana that we learned in the Brisa, Ones shegeresh, that by Ones, if he divorced her in violation of lo sucha l'shalcha lo yuchal l'shalcha, by Ones it says lo yuchal shalcha koyamav. We're about to see also the case of Motzi Shemer, where it says lo yuchal lishalcha koyamav. So I'll just choose like one of them. But anyways, like one of the phrases. So if he divorces her in violation of lo yuchal, I don't know, maybe sometimes we'll say shalcha, sometimes lishalcha, but basically by Ones says shalcha, by Motzi Shemer it says lishalcha. Anyways, so Ones shegerish, if he divorces her in violation of lo yuchal shalcha koyamav, in Yisraelu, if he's a Yisrael who could be machzer grusha, so he could remarry her, well then machzer ve'enu loka, so let him just, right, velosiya l'isha, let him just marry her, remarry her, and he can avoid makis. Im kohen hu, but if he's a kohen, and of course a kohen is not allowed to marry a grusha, so then so he can't remarry her, and he's therefore in violation of lo yuchal shalcha koyomov. He's in violation of that, and he's going to be chayiv makis. So im kohen hu loke ve'enu machzer, he can't remarry her because she's a grusha. But frek the Gemara, and this was the question that Rabbi Yochanan was struggling with, which is, Im Yisrael machzer ve'enu loke, how could the Brisa say that if he's Yisrael, let him just remarry her and avoid makis? But amai, why can he avoid makis by remarrying her? Leisaisa shekidmai esei hu velilke. It's a leisaisa shekidmai esei, and therefore he should be chayiv makis. That is what Rabbi Yochanan is struggling with. If we say Lav Shekidmu Esei Lokin Olav, then he should automatically get makis. There should be no option to remarry her. Omar Ula, so Ula comes to explain Ones for Rabbi Yochanan, right? Rabbi Yochanan is perplexed by Ones. Ula comes to explain why by Ones he could remarry her and avoid makis. It's not and therefore Rabbi Yochanan had said at the beginning of today's daf, Lav Shekidmo Esei Lokin Olav. Ula is coming to preserve that and say you can say Lav Shekidmo Esei Lokin Olav and still be able to explain why by Ones he can remarry her and avoid makis. It's not because Lav Shekidmo Esei Ein Lokin Olav. It's for a different reason. So Amar Ula, so Ula explains there's a specific reason why Ones he can avoid makis by remarrying her. Amar Ula lo yoymar lo siya leisha ba'ones v'ligmar mimotzi shemra. Because Ones and also Motzi Shemra have the same basic phrasing, which is lo siya leisha lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yomav. Be'etzem, it's almost exactly the same. So we explain what Ones is. What's Motzi Shemra? As we learned in Masechta Ksubis, I think it also came up in Sanhedrin. I'm sure it also comes up other places. Right? A person gets married, and the husband comes the next morning, comes to Bezdin, right? Psula Nises Leom Haravi, the first Mishnah Masechta Ksubis, right? So that if he has a Tainis Besulim, Yaktim V'yelech LeBezdin. So the husband comes the next day to Bezdin, and he says, my wife was not a bisula. If it turns out that he's lying, he's motzi shemra, he's lying, so then he has to pay his shver, he has to pay his father-in-law 100 silver coins, velosia leisha, and they have to remain married, lo yuchal l'shalchu koyomav, he cannot divorce her. So we see the same construct by motzi shemra. So therefore the Gemara says, and Ula explains, that really by ones, there's no need to write by ones velosia leisha, because I can just learn it out from motzi shemra. That if by motzi shemra, which is more lenient, why is motzi shemra more lenient? Well, because he didn't do anything. He just said stuff. He said lo matzasi levitcha besulim. Turns out he's a liar, and we say velosia leisha, he has to remain married to her. So if in that case, which is more lenient, velosia leisha, well then certainly by onus where he did something, was ma'anis her, so then certainly he would have to be responsible for her for the rest of his life, velosia leisha. So then, if I could just learn out ones from motzi shemra of losia leisha, that if by motzi shemra losia leisha, certainly by ones losia leisha, then why does it say velosia leisha by ones? It's extra. It's not needed. So what's it teaching us? It's teaching us that, while we know from motzi shemra that by ones he has to marry her, what losia leisha is written by ones to teach us is that even in the case of divorce, he could marry her. So therefore Ula comes to explain that there's actually, it's a gzeres hakosuv by ones, that because it says by ones velosia leisha and it's extra, it's davka coming to teach us that even in the case of divorce, velosia leisha can always remarry her. And therefore Ula is coming to say that, look, Rabbi Yochanan, don't worry. In general, lav shekidmu ese lokin alav, when it comes to ones, the reason why he can fix it by remarrying her is because it's a special gzeres hakosuv. Again, Omar Ula says, Ula lo yoymar losia leisha ba'ones, that it doesn't need to say velosia leisha when it comes to ones, because v'ligma motzi shema, I'll just learn it out from motzi shema, because after all, ma motzi shema shaloi also maise omrachman velosia leisha. If by motzi shema, where he didn't do anything, he just said lo matzasi levitcha besulim, and still we punish him by saying, you're responsible for her the rest of your life. So ones lo kol shekin, certainly by ones where he did something, he should have that stringency, that requirement to be responsible for her his entire life. So it doesn't need to say velosia leisha by ones. I could just know it from the fact that that's the halacha by motzi shemra. And therefore, why does it say velosia leisha by ones? Because imenu inyan lifanov, if it's not needed to teach us lifanov before he divorces her, i.e. that initially he needs to marry her, teneu inyan la'acharav, so say that it's teaching for after he divorces her, shem geresh, that if he divorces her, yachzir, he can remarry her and avoid makos for having violating lo yuchal l'shalchu kol yomav. He can fix that by remarrying her. But ve'akati, but we say actually maybe I do need it to say velosia leisha by ones. Maybe I can't learn out ones from motzi shemra, because actually maybe motzi shemra is more chamor, is more stringent than ones. Why? Because motzi shemra, as we've learned recently, is loka u'mishalim. Motzi shemra, right? It says that he must pay his shver, his father-in-law, 100 silver coins, and also we give him makos. V'yisra also we give him makos. So that's a chid, but that's unique to motzi shemra, that there's both makos and mammon. And therefore, I could argue that by motzi shemra, which is stringent in where since there's makos and mammon, right? Lokin u'mishalim. So yeah, not only lokin u'mishalim, but also velosia leisha. But by onus, where there's no loke u'mishalim, maybe it wouldn't be lo siya lisha. It's a more lenient case. Maybe he doesn't need to marry her. So therefore, I do actually need to say v'lo siya lisha by onus. Vakati onus mimotzi shemra lo gomer. But still, I can argue that we can't learn out onus from motzi shemra because motzi shemra is actually more stringent than onus. The ikal mefrach, because you can ask malamotzi shemra shekin loko mishalim. That motzi shemra is more stringent than onus because there's malchus and mammon. Ella, so rather we actually need lo siya leisha by onus. And rather, lo yomar lo siya leisha b'motzi shemra v'ligmar me'onus. Rather, the opposite. Let's not write v'lo siya leisha by motzi shemra. And still, I would be able to learn it out from onus. That if by onus, where there's no loke u'mishalim, and yet it says v'lo siya leisha, then certainly by motzi shemra, where there is the stringency of loke u'mishalim, there would also then be. Right, it's a more stringent case, so of course there would also be there lo siya leisha. If by onus, which is more lenient, there's lo siya leisha, certainly by motzi shemra, which is more stringent, there's lo siya leisha. Uma onus she'eno loke u'mishalim omer achman v'lo siya leisha. If by onus, which is more lenient in that there's no malchus u'mammon, and yet v'lo siya leisha, motzi shemra lo kol shkein, certainly then by motzi shemra, which is more stringent in that there's malchus u'mammon, there should definitely be also lo siya leisha. V'lo menemar. So then why does it say v'lo siya leisha by motzi shemra if it's superfluous, it's not needed? Im eino inyan lemotzi shemra tenu inyan lo ones. Well, if it's not necessary to teach me anything from motzi shemra, because lo siya leisha I can learn out from ones, so why does it say lo siya leisha by motzi shemra? Well, I don't need it for motzi shemra, so let's say it's to teach me an extra halacha by onus. Now, onus already says lo siya leisha, so what would the extra lo siya leisha be to do? What would it accomplish by onus? So, im enu inyan lefonov, tneu inyan le'acharav. And if it's not necessary for onus to say that v'lo siya leisha, that he needs to marry her, because it already says v'lo siya leisha. So what's the extra v'lo siya leisha for? It's to teach that if he divorces her, then he can avoid makis by remarrying her. Umotzi shemra me'ones nami lo gomer. But 1 second. We can't learn out motzi shemra from ones, and to say that if by ones, which is more lenient, there's lo siya leisha, then certainly by motzi shemra, because I can argue, as we said earlier, that onus is actually more stringent than motzi shemra because there's a maise. You can ask, mala onus sheken also maise. That by onus there is a maise, and it's actually more stringent, and therefore maybe lo siya leisha is by onus, but not by motzi shemra. Elo lo yomar lo siya leisha b'motzi shemra sharei ishtohi. So rather, says the Gemara, wait, how about this? Motzi shemra does not need to say lo siya leisha that and you will marry her, because they're already married. What's motzi shemra? Motzi shemra is they got married, and the next day he says lo matzosi levitcha b'sum, but they're already married. Why does it say v'lo siya leisha? Now he has to marry her. They're already married. So lo menemar imenu inyan lemotzi shemra. So if it's not necessary for motzi shemra because they're already married, so teneu inyan leones. So let's say that the pasuk is talking about onus. Ve'im enu inyan lefanav teneu inyan la'acharav. And if it's not necessary for before, right, to say that they need to get married, because it already says by onus that they need to get married. So what's this extra lo siya leisha doing by onus to say that if they get divorced, they can get remarried and he can avoid makis dawi? Ve'emo ve'menu inyan lefanav demotzi shemra teneu inyan la'acharav didei dilo laki. Then the Gemara asks a question, which is, wait a second, 1 second. So we're saying that by motzi shemra also, of course, there is v'lo siya leisha, lo yucha l'shalcha kol yama. So we said, okay, v'lo siya leisha isn't necessary for motzi shemra to say that he has to marry her because they're already married. So we say, okay, fine. So if it's not needed for motzi shemra. Let's say it's talking about onus. that if he divorces her, he can get remarried. But one second, why don't we say that it's necessary for Motzi Shemra? Motzi Shemra also has the same lo saseh of lo yuchal shalcha kol yamav. So when it says Velosia Isha, which is unnecessary by Motzi Shemra because they're already married, why don't you say that it's talking about, okay, well it's saying that if they get divorced, he can remedy it and avoid makis by remarrying her. Let's say that Losia Isha is relevant is needed for Motzi Shemra to say that if they get divorced, he could avoid makis by getting remarried. Why are we applying it to onus? Eina chinami. The Gemara says, taka. That you're right. Losia Leisha is not necessary by Motzi Shemra because they're already married. So what's it doing there? That, well, if he violates Lo Yuchal Shalchel Kol Yomav, he can avoid makis by remarrying her by Motzi Shemra. V'asi ones v'gomer minei. And let's say that, okay, and then we'll just learn ones from Motzi Shemra. We'll just learn out ones from Motzi Shemra and say that also by ones, if he divorces her, he can avoid makis by getting remarried. But my gomer meaning, how can you? Is the game? Is it free for all? Okay, so by Motzi Shemra we have Losia Leisha to say that if he divorces her, he can avoid makis by remarrying her. And now we say, okay, and just like by Motzi Shemra, the same applies to onus. How are we applying it to onus? Ibe kavachomer, ibe mematzinu, hikal mifrach mal Motzi Shemra shekein lo asa ma'aseh. How are we going to, whether we say a mematzinu, which is just like by Motzi Shemra, you can avoid makis by remarrying her, so also by onus, you can avoid makis by remarrying her. Alternatively, you could make a kavachomer. Well, if by Motzi Shemra, which is more lenient in that there's no maise, the opposite. If by Motzi Shemra, which is more stringent, which is that it's loka u'mashalim, and yet you can avoid makis by doing the essay, well then, by remarrying her. So certainly by onus, which is more lenient, that there's no loka u'mashalim, you should be able to avoid makis by remarrying her. But in both of those cases, mala motzi shemra, shken lo asa ma'aseh. You could say, yeah, but maybe I can argue that motzi shemra is more lenient in that there's no mice over there. By onus, there was a mice, so maybe by Motzi Shemra he could remedy it by remarrying it, but not by onus. So we can't just apply this halacha of being able to avoid makis by remarrying that and say that just like it's by Motzi Shemra, you can also have it by onus as well. So basically, we're actually a shtickle stuck here with Ula, right? Because this was a lot of details here. So where are we right now? Where we are is that Rabbi Yochanan had said, Lav shekidmo essay lokin alav. Then he got stuck because by onus it's a lav shekidmo essay, right? It says losia lisho, that's the essay followed by the lav of lo yuchal shalcha kol yamav. And by onus we have a brayso that says that he can always just remarry her and fix things and avoid makis even if he divorces her. Now, this is a lav shekidmo essay, there should be a chiyuv makis. Ula came to say, well, there's a gzeres hakosov by onus of lo sia leisha, it's not really necessary, why is it there? It's there to say that even if you get divorced, you could remarry and avoid makis. But we're actually a little stuck right now because we said, no, lo sia leisha is really only extra by motzi shemra, and it's needed to teach that by motzi shemra, if he divorces her, he could remarry her. And we can't just apply it to onus. So, okay, so what are we going to do with, right? So Rabbi Yochanan is a real question. Right, here we have onus, which is lav she kidmo essay, and we're saying that you can avoid makis. So, Elo amar Rave, rather says Rave, kol yomov ba'amod v'hachzer. V'chein ki osa Rave amar Rabbi Yochanan kol yomov ba'amod v'hachzer. Wow. So actually comes Rava, and actually I guess interestingly also v'chein ki osa Rave amar Rabbi Yochanan. Interesting. When Ravin came, he actually said the name Rabbi Yochanan, which sounds like Rabbi Yochanan is actually kind of answering his own question, which is that actually, Chaver, listen to this. You ready for this? You're ready. Onus is not, and I guess Motzi Shemra as well, is not lav shekidmo essay. Why did we think it's a lav shekidmo essay? Because it says velosi elisho, that's a essay, followed by lo yuchal l'shalcha. So the lav was preceded by an essay. Right? It says you have to be married, you can't divorce her. So it sounded like a lav shekidmo essay. Actually, says Rava and Rabbi Yochanan, that it's not a lav shekidmo essay, it's a lav shenitko le'essay. It's a lav that's followed by an essay, which is the remedy for the lav. How is it a lav shenitko essay? How is it a lav that's followed by an essay? Chevre, because you have to read the psukim carefully. Lo yucha l'shalcha kol yamav. You can't divorce her forever. But if you divorce her and remarry her, which means that it wasn't forever, it was only temporary, you'll avoid makis, right? The lo yuchal l'shalchav, what you're not allowed to do, what you chayiv makis for is kol yamav, to divorce her forever. But as long as you remarry her or even can remarry her, so just remarry her and then avoid makis. So kilo, it's like the makis is actually suspended so long as you can still remarry her. So either you do remarry her, problem solved, or if you don't remarry her, well, get remarried to avoid it. But we're not going to give you makis right now, so long as you can remarry her. So actually, it's a lav shenitko le'essay. So actually, a motzi shema and onis is lo yuchal l'shalcha, but kol yamav. It's not lo yuchal l'shalcha. It's not just that you're not allowed to divorce her. It's not what it says. You're not allowed to divorce her forever. But if you remarry her, or even have the possibility to remarry her, well, then we'll suggest, well, why don't you just remarry her, and then we won't give you makis. So it's actually a lav shenitak le'essay. And therefore, and that is why the Brisa says, just remarry her and avoid makis. Just remarry her and avoid makis. So we can say that generally, lav shekidmo essay lokin alav, and actually ones and motzi shemra is lav shenitak leessay, and that is why there's no makis. There's makis if you're a kohen and you can't remarry her, but if you're Yisrael and you can remarry her, there's not going to be makis, because just remarry her and avoid makis that way. Again, Elo Amar Rava, rather says Rava, kol yomov be'amod behachzer, that we don't give him makis by ones because, for the rest of his life, basically, even if he divorces her for the rest of his life, we'll basically just say, hey, you can always remarry her and avoid makis, so therefore we're not going to give him makis because there's always the option to remarry her. V'chein ki asa Ravin Amar Rabbi Yechanan kol yomov be'amod behachzer. And when Ravin came, he said the same thing from Rabbi Yochanan, that he can always remarry her later and avoid makis. Rav Papa asks Akasha to Ravi, V'ha lo dami lave lelav de chasima. We had learned the other day, where did we learn this? On Daf Yud Gimel, that we compare makis to lav da chasima, because the Torah talks about makis and then it talks immediately afterwards lav da chasima. So we say that you get makis in lavs that are like the lav da chasima of lo sachsom shor b'disho. Do not muzzle a ox while it is plowing. That's how we know that you only get for los asay, not for asay, and that it's not a lav shenita asay. We learn, right? You get makis in scenarios that are similar to the lav da chasima. So now, lav da chasima is not a lav shekidmo essay. So Rav Papa asks Abaye, or Rav Papa asks Rava, since the lav da chasima is not a lav shekidmo essay, I will argue that lav shekidmo essay ain't lokin alav. It's not like it's dissimilar to lav da chasima. So Omar Le, so Rav responds to Rav Papa, what? Mishum dechasav beirachmana essay yisera migragara? What, just because the Torah added a mitzvah's essay, all of a sudden that weakens it, and you're not going to get makis? Right? The fact that there's additionally an essay is not going to make it any worse. But then why don't I make the same argument by lav shenita kla'ese? Lav shenita, what's the lav shenita kla'ese? It's a lav, right? In this case, don't divorce her. And now it's followed by a mitzvah's essay, and we're saying that just because there's a mitzvah's essay now, it makes it worse and you don't get makis? So Rava says, yeah, but by lav shenita kla'ese, the essay is specifically a solution for the lav. Kilu, don't divorce her, and the essay is, and if you do divorce her, do this and fix it. But lav shekidmo essay is not a solution and is not a remedy to the lav, right? For example, when it says, when you have a zav or a mitzora, they have to get out of the camp, and then it says, don't go into the Beis HaMikdash. Being sent out of the camp is not a remedy for, and if you go into the Beis HaMikdash, leave the camp. No, it's not that. Those are two separate things. There's an assay of if you're a zav or a mitzora, you have to get out of the camps. And also, don't go into the Beis HaMikdash if you're tamei. If you do, and you warn you from Makos, you're going to get Makos. The fact that there happened to be a mitzvah assay right before them, of telling you what they need to do, is that what they should be doing is getting out of the camp and not going into the Beis HaMikdash. The fact that there's a mitzvah assay is not going to make things any worse. And of course, you're going to be chayav makos, but lav shenita kla'aseh is davka the opposite. The whole point of lav shenita kla'aseh is that if you violate the lav, the essay that follows is what you do to fix it. Right? There's also an aspect over here of like kilu, the mitzvah's essay over here is only possible because the lav was done in a certain sense, right? Meaning in the first case of a zav and mitzora, leaving the camp, those are two separate things, right? The zav and the mitzora have to leave the camp. That's thing number one. Thing number two, if a tamei person goes to the Beis HaMikdash, you're going to be chayav karis, and if they warn for Makos, and chayav Makos, but there's two separate things, right? Leaving the camp is not dependent on having gone into the Beis HaMikdash. Two separate things, and the fact that there was a mitzvah's essay before the lav is not going to get you out of Makos somehow. But lav shenita kla'aseh is davka the opposite. Kilu, remarrying is only possible if you divorced, right? When it says lo tosimu menu ad bokav anosu menu beis tisrofu, you can only burn it the next day if you left it over. You can't kilu, right? By the nosar, it's saying if you have nosar, okay, then burn the nosar. You can only burn the nosar if you had nosar. Here also, remarry her. You can only remarry her if you divorced her. So like kilu, these are solutions for if you violated the lav. So this is what you do to fix it. So yeah, of course, memela, there's not going to be makos if you do the fix. Okay. Now, moving on. Wow, this has been. Wow, just getting through this Amud took 40 minutes, right? This is great stuff, though. Lav shenita kla'aseh, lav shekidmo essay. Now we're going to go a little bit deeper on lav shenita kla'aseh. Well, there's really great stuff on this daf. Lav shekidmo essay, lav shenita kla'aseh. Now we're going to get into bitlo, kiyimo. We're going to get in at the end of the daf. We're going to get into hasra sofik, lav shem bo maiseh. This is a great daf. Now, says the Gemara, Hanicha l'man da'omer bitlo v'lo bitlo l'man da'omer kimo v'lo kimo ma'ika l'meimar. Wow. So, as we're going to learn in a few minutes from now, there's basically two ways to understand lav shenita kla'aseh. So one way to understand lav shenita kla'aseh is the way that we've been understanding it. Bitlo v'lo bitlo. How did we understand it? We said that by ones, lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yom, he's not allowed to divorce her. If he does divorce her, right, it says lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yom, he can't divorce her forever. And so long as he remarries her, whether it is now, whether it's in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, even if he doesn't remarry her, but he could remarry her, right? Meaning, even if it's 20 years from now, we say, hey, you divorced your wife, you're a ma'anes, you're chayav makos, you have to remarry her. There isn't really a time limit. So long as he can remarry her, we're going to say, remarry her to avoid makos. If he's mevatel it's not so clear how exactly he could create a situation where he deliberately ruins the possibility of remarrying. If he deliberately ruins the possibility of being able to remarry this woman, well then yeah, he's going to be chayev makis. But so long as he hasn't deliberately been mevatel it, deliberately ruined the possibility to be able to be mekayim the mitzvahs essay, in this case to get remarried, so then he's not going to be chayev makis. That's bitlo v'lo bitlo, right? So long as you have not been mevatel the possibility, ruined the possibility of being able to be mekayim the essay, there's no makis. If you bitlo, if you were mevatel the possibility, if you did something that would make it impossible, it would make it usher to be able to remarry her, so now you can't remarry her, well, okay, you can be chayev makis. That's one way to understand it. But so long as you haven't been mevatel it, even if it's 20 years later, you're still not going to be chayev makis. We'll still say, hey, just remarry her so that you don't get makis. Now, the other way to understand it is kiyimo v'lo kimo. This is very different. This is that if you divorce her, well, then we're going to take you to Bezdin, we're going to give you two options. Remarry her right now, or be chayev makis. Meaning that the way to understand it, kimo v'lo kimo, is that if you divorce this woman, right, but in the case of onus, if you divorce her, we say, hey, if you divorce her, you're going to be chayev makis. And he divorces her, he's chayev makis. And we take him to Bezdin, and Bezdin says, look, you're chayev makis. What you can do is, you can remarry her. If you remarry her, we won't give you makis. You don't remarry her, we're giving you makis. Kilu, it's not about like, as long as you didn't ruin the possibility, no. Kimo v'lo kimo. If you're mekayim the essay, no, then you'll avoid makis. If you're not going to be mekayim the essay right now, we're going to hit you. Okay? So I understand kol yamav, right? It says, lo yucha l'shalcha kol yamav. We said he can't divorce her forever. Meaning there isn't a specific, right? Meaning we can't, if we take him to Bezdin and say, hey, remarry her, he'll say, wait, I don't want to get remarried right now. Right? Kol yamav is just, I can't divorce her forever, and I'll get remarried in 50 years from now. Right? This kol yamav only makes sense if you understand lav shenitak le'esei as being that so long as you haven't been mevatel it, then you'll avoid makis. Then kol yamav, we say, right? You have basically a lifetime there's no rush. So that makes sense if you say it's about being mevatel versus not mevatel. As long as you haven't been mevatel, you can avoid makis. But if you say kimo v'lo kimo, you don't have your whole life. We'll take you to Bezdin right now. We'll say, remarry her or get makis. There's no, I have my whole lifetime to do it. So if you understand lav shenitak le'esei as being kimo v'lo kimo, then how do you understand this lo yucha l'shalcha kol yamav as being that you have a whole lifetime, that the pasuk is saying you have a whole lifetime to remarry? So where are we? I lost myself. Here we are. So again, this whole thing about kol yamav, you have your whole lifetime to get remarried to avoid makis, makes sense if you say bitlo v'lo bitlo. It's about so long as you haven't been mevatel the possibility, then you can still avoid makis. But if you say that you can avoid makis only if you do the remedy right this second, you don't have kol yamav. So how do you understand kol yamav? So says the Gemara, look, midu time Rabbi Yochanan, the whole point of kol yamav, of kol yamav ba'amod v'hachzer, of being able to get remarried till his final day. So that was a remedy for Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan was in a quandary. He said, on the one hand, lav shkid mo'esei lokan olav. On the other hand, I don't know what to do about onus. In the end, we found a way to answer for Rabbi Yochanan, right? And he says, even at Rabbi Yosef Amar Rabbi Yochanan, right? Kol yom amod b'hachzer. It was necessary for Rabbi Yochanan to be able to understand why by onus he can avoid makis. And he says because it's kol yomav, he has his whole life to get remarried. And according to Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is bitlo v'lo bitlo. Rabbi Yochanan understands lav sheniktak le'esei as being so long as you haven't been mevatel it, you can avoid makis. So midei utayme el Rabbi Yochanan, the whole reason for kol yomav ba'amod v'hachzer of lo yuchal l'shalcha kol yamav, explaining it that it's a lav shenitak le'esei, that was necessary to explain for Rabbi Yochanan. Ha'amar le Rabbi Yochanan Tana tni bidlo chayv lo bidlo pater. Rabbi Yochanan's opinion is bitlo v'lo bitlo. So therefore, Kilo, if you're saying that Kol Yom Amud B'Hachzer only makes sense if you hold bitlo v'lo bitlo. Well, guess what? Amud B'Hachzer is Rabbi Yochanan's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan Taka holds bitlo v'lo bitlo. The Tani Tana Kabbalah Rabbi Yochanan, because one time a teacher of Brises taught before Rabbi Yochanan, when you have a lav shenitak le'esay, kiyem esay sheba potter bitel esay sheba chayiv. He said something which didn't make sense. Amarle Maika Amart. And Rabbi Yochanan says, I don't understand what you're saying. Meaning, he said apples and oranges. Kilu, right? Kiyem potter lo kiyem chayiv, bitel chayiv lo bitel potter. Kilu, he's mixing and matching this Tana. Again, the Tana comment of Rabbi Yochanan, this Tana top for Rabbi Yochanan, kol mitzvahs le'sasi shesh b'kum esay, when you have a lav shenitak le'esay, kiyem esay sheba potter. So if we take you to Bezdin, and Bezdin says, look, do the mitzvah esay, right, remarry her now, and you'll avoid makis, right, so kiyem esay sheba potter. If he remarries her right now, so then we'll avoid makis, implying that if he doesn't remarry her right now, even though he was not mevatel, he can always remarry her potentially in 10 years from now, right? He didn't do anything to be unable to remarry her, but he didn't marry her right now. So we're saying, so the implication is kilu kiyem esay sheba potter. If he is mekayim the mitzvah esay, if he remarries her now, so then he'll avoid makis, implying that if he doesn't remarry her now, he'll get makis. Even though he wasn't mevatel the possibility, but he'll still get makis. But then it says, then the Tana says, bitel esay sheba chayiv, that if he's mevatel the essay, if he does something to ruin the possibility to be able to ever remarry her, then he's chayiv makis, implying that so long as he hasn't ruined that possibility, he won't get makis. But from the Reisha, it implied that he would get makis. So Rabbi Yochanan says, what are you saying? Either you have to say kiyem potter lo kiyem chayiv, either you have to say that if you remarry potter, if you don't remarry right now, chayiv. Alternatively, bitel chayiv lo bitel potter. If you're mevatel, if you ruin the possibility of getting remarried, you're chayiv. As long as you don't ruin that possibility, you're potter. You have to choose one. You have to be consistent. Therefore, says Rabbi Yochanan to the Tana, Tni, bitlo v'lo bitlo. Rabbi Yochanan says, rather say bitlo v'lo bitlo, that if he's mevatel, if he ruins the possibility of ever being able to remarry her, then he'll be chayiv makis. So long as he hasn't ruined that possibility, even if he hasn't yet remarried her, he'll be potter. If he ruins the possibility, he's chayiv. If he hasn't ruined the possibility, he's potter. Whereas Rish Lakish says it's about being mekayim versus not. If we bring him to Bezdin and we say he just divorced his wife and we warned him you can't do it, he was ma'ane, right? He was a case of onus. Bezdin says, look, remarry her now or get makis. If he remarries her, he avoids makis. If he doesn't remarry her, he gets makis. But Michael, figure what's the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish? Why does Rabbi Yochanan say bidlo v'lo bidlo and Rish Lakish says kiyemo v'lo kiyemo? B'asra sofik kamiflige ma'asra asra sofik shma asra ma'asra asra sofik lo shma hasra. It is a machlokes about hasra sofik. Rabbi Yochanan says hasras sofik shma hasra. A uncertain warning is still a valid warning. So meaning, in the case of onus, you warn him and you say, hey, if you divorce this woman, you might get makis. When are you going to get makis? I don't know. If you're mevatel it, maybe you'll be, I don't know, maybe in 5 years, 10 years, tomorrow, 20 years, 30 years. There's a possibility that at some point in the future you might get makis. Rabbi Yochanan's okay with that. And therefore, if he's mevatel it, we'll give him makis when he's mevatel it. So long as he hasn't been mevatel it, he'll avoid makis. Whereas Rish Lakish says, no, asra safek lo shma asra. A safek asra is invalid. And therefore, according to Rish Lakish, when he divorces his wife, when this ones situation, when this ma'anis divorces his wife, we say, hey, if you divorce your wife, you're going to be chayiv makis. And he divorces his wife, so we schlep him to Bezdin. And Bezdin says, hey, you're chayiv makis. You were warned not to divorce your wife. You divorced your wife, you're chayiv makis. But if you remarry her right now, then we won't give you makis. So in that case, it's not asra suffix, it's asra vada. If you divorce, you're going to be chayiv makis. And you are chayiv makis. You can get out of it by remarrying her right now. And if you remarry her, fine, we won't give you makis. If you're not going to remarry her right now, we're going to give you makis. So therefore, Rabbi Yochanan says, bitlo v'lo bitlo, Rish Lakish says kiyamo v'lo kiyamo. So again, my sover asra suffix shma asra, Rabbi Yochanan says asra suffix is a valid asra, my sover asra suffix lo shma asra, whereas Rish Lakish says asra suffix is invalid. And they're consistent with their reasoning. The itmar, that it was stated shvua she'ochal kikar ze hayom v'aver hayom v'lo ochla Rabbi Yochanan v'Rish Lakish dar mitavayu eino loke. That if a person makes a shvua, we're going to start learning Masechta Shvuos in about a week and a half. Yeah, Masechta Shvuos is 49 daf. Masechta Shvuos is 49 dapim. You know what else is 49? Sfiras HaOmer. 49 days in Sfiras HaOmer. Masechta Shvuos and Masechta Sota are Masechtas that people, I mean, I don't know if I've ever actually met anybody who did it. Maybe Josh Weinberg once did it. I don't know. I was in Shul yesterday and people were learning Masechta Sota. Hopefully they'll still be okay. I'll see if in a week from now they're on Daf Ches of Masechta Sota. I hope so. That would be great. But anyways, so we missed it by like 2 weeks. I'm going to start Masechta Sota probably about 10 days into Sfiras HaOmer, which means everybody else will probably be about 17 or 20 days into Sfiras HaOmer by then. But anyways, where are we? So in about a week and a half, we're going to start learning Masechta Shvuos. If a person makes a shvua that I am going to eat this bread today, this loaf of bread today. So if you warn him, hey, if you don't eat the loaf of bread today, you're going to get makis. So he's not actually going to be chayiv makis, right? If a person makes a shvua that I'm going to eat this loaf of bread today, and sure enough, the day ends, and the loaf of bread is still there. It is not in his tummy. He didn't eat it. Rabbi Yochanan v'Rish Lakish, both of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish agree he does not get makis, but for different reasons. Rabbi Yochanan says, look, it's not a problem of asra suffix. What's the asra suffix? The asra suffix is that, well, we don't know. He's got the whole day. Maybe he's going to eat it. Maybe he's not going to eat it. Maybe by the end of the day he already ate it. Maybe he didn't. We don't know. Rabbi Yochanan isn't fazed about asra suffix because he says asra suffix shma asra. Rabbi Yochanan, however, says it's a lav shein b'maisa. Right? Rabbi Yochanan omer eino loke mishum dehave lav shein b'maisa v'chol lav shein b'maisa ein loke nolo. Rabbi Yochanan says he doesn't get makis because the lav shein b'maisa, he didn't do anything. He just sat around. He didn't. Why is it? What did he do wrong? He didn't eat the bread. He didn't do anything. So we're not going to give makis for what he didn't do. The asra isn't the problem. The asra suffix is not a problem. But it's a lav shein b'maisa and lo kanov. Rish Lakish says, no, lav shein b'maisa lo kanov. That's not the problem. He can get makis for lav shein b'maisa, but eino lo kan mishum dave asra suffix v'chol asra suffix lo shma asra. That Rish Lakish says that he doesn't get makis because it's memele, it's asra suffix. We don't, he's not saying, it's not like, hey, if you're about to do what you're going to do, they're going to be chayiv makis, right? And if you divorce your wife right now and you're not allowed to because it's onus, you're going to be chayiv makis. And then he does it. So it's no suffix. Is he going to do it? Isn't he going to do it? He just said, don't do it, and he does it. So, but over here, we don't know. You're warning him, and who knows? Maybe later on he'll eat it. Maybe he won't eat it. So it's asras suffix, and therefore, okay, fine. Okay. Wait. Let me see. Okay, fine. Right? There's a time limit for he's got time the whole day. Maybe the day will pass, maybe the day won't pass. So therefore, Rish Lakish says lav shem b'maisa lo kan love that's not the issue, but it's because it's asra suffix. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan says asra suffix shmo asra. Rish Lakish says asra suffix lo shma asra. What time is it? Oh wow, okay. That wasn't such a big daf, but there was a lot to explain there. We're going to stop here, even though we can keep going, but I'm going to stop here. We learned this is a packed daf. Lav shekidmo essay, lav shenitakla essay. By onus, we got into that whole discussion of is onus lav shekidmu essay? Is it lav shenitak essay? Is it a whole separate Gzeres HaKosov? We got into Asra Sofek. We got into lav shein bo maise. We got into how exactly does lav shenitak essay work? Is it bitlo? Is it kiyamo? Machlokes Reb Yochanan, Rish Lakish. So much on this daf. What a gevaldige daf. Peace out.